Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blaze Your Own Trail podcast. My name is Jordan Mendoza. I'm your host, and I've got a very special guest today. His name is Ryan D. Lee, and I'm going to have him tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does today.
Jordan, I got to tell you, man, just hearing you introduce me on your podcast is a privilege. It is an honor, my friends. I'm honored to be here. Jordan, what I do today is I help people take control over their money. And although we put a very defined mission statement on it, my goal is to help people retire in 10 years or less. And I only use that word retirement to meet people where they're at, to get them to understand that we're talking about owning your time. I don't really believe in the idea of retirement. So really what I do is I help people take control of their money so they can take control of their life. And I believe, Jordan, that money's greatest intrinsic value is to give you more options in your life and more control over your time. And so I help people do that in a very constrained window, 10 years or less.
Love it. Love it. And my favorite part of the show, as you've had a chance to dive into some episodes, is taking that rewind, and we want to see what you're made of. We want to see where you came from and get some context on the journey. So where were you born and raised? And what kind of kid were you? What type of things did you get into in the adolescent years?
Man, I tell you what, it says I'm so excited to go here because I don't go here very often, right? But I was born and raised in Utah. I actually live in a house right here in Utah. I moved back to Utah about 12 years ago, 14 years ago. And I live in a house where I used to hunt. Like this whole area up on the mountainside, there was nothing here. It was just, shrubs and trees. And we used to hunt here. And when I moved back, they were doing a little development here. And I thought to myself, man, I'm going to go. That area was special to me. And so I live right here in Utah. But here's the funniest thing about kind of my adolescent years. My dad likes to call me a knucklehead, right? One of the reasons he calls me that is I kind of learn things the hard way. I'm a little bit stubborn. And if someone tells me no, I'm going to do it, until I learn the lesson that I need to learn. And as a adolescent, I kind of tested all my boundaries. I ended up dropping out of high school. I didn't love the being told what to do or told how to learn. And it's not like I dropped out of high school to do anything productive with my life. I kind of messed around and basically lived in the gutter for 4 or 5 years. And it was really interesting. That set me off on a path where I realized after a couple of years and some hard knocks and some hard mistakes that I didn't want that. That wasn't what my life was meant to be. And I either let go completely and just slide into the abyss, or I start making better decisions with my life. And that's kind of what led me to opening up to a different path, really finding God inside of my life, finding a sense of purpose inside of my life, finding the beautiful woman I'm married to today. She never would have looked at me if she would have met me back in my high school dropout days, but found this woman and we got married and I started off down the corporate path. And that's really what opened me up to what I do today. Because in that corporate path, I'll never forget, Jordan, I found myself in a position where you know, I I just followed the traditional scripts. Like as soon as I decided to get my life back together, it was go to school, get a job, save in a 401k, and one day it's going to work out. And so I started doing that. And as I was putting money away in my 401k and IRA and brokerage accounts and all that stuff, I started making little trade-offs with my life. And I didn't realize those trade-offs in the beginning, but making a couple hundred thousand, or not 100,000, $32,000 was my salary out of college. And I thought to myself, I want to make more. So I started to climb the corporate ladder, right? And every rung of the corporate ladder I would climb, I got a little promotion, made a little bit more money, got some bonuses, but I started making trade-offs. And I kept telling myself, Jordan, one day when I have enough money, when the 401k gets big enough, I'll buy my life back. And in the beginning, honestly, those trade-offs, they were kind of exciting, bigger geography, more travel, more responsibility, more prestige, corner office. But I found myself early on in my career, about 4 years out of college, where I was disconnected from my family. Those trade-offs were starting to catch up to me. I wasn't, I lived in a different state than my family because I traveled so much. I would come home on the weekends. I wasn't a very good father, wasn't a very good husband. And I just kept thinking in my life, is this it, right? Do I have to, how am I going to get out of this? And I'll never forget, that's really what opened me up to starting to think differently, because in 2008, my net worth crested $100,000. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm making it, right? I'm making it. But in 2008, we all know what happens. Everything dropped like a rock. My $100,000 net worth, it dropped down to $28,000. And the two lessons I learned from that, lesson number one, I had no control. And if I had no control, how could I ever control my financial plan to buy my life back? That was my whole goal. Work hard, save hard, retire early. And I'm grateful that it happened about 4 years out of college because it was a window into my future. I was kinda modeling my career, my life, my path after people who were 20, 30 years ahead of me. I wanted to be a vice president one day, right? And, I remember looking at those people. These were people who had traded their entire life. Many of them were on their 2nd, 3rd marriage. They were probably overweight, and it's not like they were all bad people, but they had traded their life away, and in 2008, I watched their lives melt down, and I thought to myself, "That's me 30 years from now." And I did not. I was unwilling to trade the next 30 years, making the trade-offs I'd made up to that point with my money and my life. And so that's what opened me up to the doorway of where we're at today and what we'll be talking about today. But, I grew up as I had to learn things the hard way. And in my finances, I learned things the hard way. My dad called me a knucklehead. He still calls me a knucklehead because once I get punched in the face a couple of times, I realize, well, I probably better turn the other cheek and figure out something else.
Well, it takes a knucklehead to know a knucklehead, I would say.
There we go.
But also, everyone's a knucklehead. I have knucklehead sons, daughters. I'm probably the winner of all the knucklehead awards in my household. But we have to be able to admit it, and it just because it took a little longer doesn't mean we still didn't get there in the end, right? That's kind of the way that I look at it. So I'd love to let's talk a little bit about you start to make some shifts and changes, and it gets you in a position to meet your wife. So tell the audience that you guys have a family now. What does that look like? And if so, talk a little bit about what it's like being a parent.
Yeah, man. I didn't go to college until I was 23. And, this is after I dropped out of high school, kind of messed around with life. Once I decided to get my life back on track, I went and got a GED. And I thought to myself, well, professional, responsible people, they go to college, right? They get a job or they go to college so they can get a job. And so I went to college not with the intention of learning anything. In fact, I felt so behind in my life, Jordan. I felt so behind at 23 being a high school dropout. I mean, come on, are you kidding me? And so I went into college and my goal was to go through it as fast as I could. I ended up getting my 4-year degree, my bachelor's degree in 2 years. I don't know how, looking back, how they let me do this. My senior year, I took 2 classes at the same time and I just rotated what day I went to what class. And as long as I passed, as long as I got that degree, I didn't really care. And I was so focused on running through college so I could get on with my life that I wasn't looking around until I ran into Beth. And I'll never forget that day, right? I was in the 2nd floor of the library. I was down there studying, trying to manage my 24 credits I'm taking. And I look up and the table I'm sitting at, there's a table, directly across from me. And there she is, right? There she is. And man, I just like, you have those moments. I just stared. I couldn't help myself. I'm just staring. And she looks up and we made eye contact. And like, I'm a shy guy. I was embarrassed. So I hurried and looked down, right? And I couldn't help myself. I look back up, right? Maybe a few minutes later. And again, I'm staring at her and she looks up and we make eye contact again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. And the third time I did it, I'm staring at her. We make eye contact again. And I just shove all my books in my bag and I stumble out of the library. And I go home to my roommate and I tell him, man, I just saw the woman of my dreams, but I was too shy, too embarrassed to talk to her. Now, fortunately, she went home to her roommate and said, I saw the guy of my dreams, but he didn't come up and talk to me. He stumbled out of the library like an idiot, right? And we ended up having a class together that I didn't even know. It's one of those big old classes. And as soon as I was in that class, I saw her. And man, I'm so grateful I went to college. And yes, I got my degree. But what I really found is I found my wife, Bethany. And, what has defined our life, I'll never forget, when we graduated college, she was so excited to become a mother. Now, of course, I wanted to be a father, but I thought to myself, that's, later. And so we got married. We had our first baby right out of college. And that first baby, he was born with a heart defect. And I knew about that heart defect. We monitored him from his, in the womb all the way to when he was born. And I'll never forget when he came out, that roller coaster of emotion. I was so nervous to be a father, to have responsibility. I felt like I could barely take care of myself. Now I'm taking care of a wife. Here comes this little baby boy. And I felt all these nerves, all this anxiety, all of this apprehension. And the second the doctor lifted him above that curtain and I saw that boy, my heart, it felt like I was on a roller coaster. My heart went from my stomach to my throat and I was in love, right? I was in love with that little kid. And then he's my oldest. I have 2 more. But being a father has been one of the greatest honors of my life. And kind of going back to this idea of these trade offs, early on in my life, in my career, I thought, man, I'm going to work hard, trade my time, and I'll figure out a father when I've got more money. And for those first couple of years, we were monitoring my son's heart defect because, we knew about it and they kept telling us he grow out of it, he might grow out of it. And I'll never forget the day. This was about 3 months after I'd lost all that money in the stock market in 2008. I got a call from my wife. And again, man, I didn't live in the same state. Covered such a big geography, and I'd moved my family around so much in our early corporate days that they lived in Texas and I worked in Indianapolis. And I got a call from Bethany, and she told me, "Hey, Ryan, I'm taking Doug in for an emergency open heart surgery." I took him to his, orthopedic person, and they said fluid blood is leaking out of his heart and it's going into his lungs. They have to close his heart right now. And man, Jordan, at that moment, life slapped me in the face. I realized that trade offs have a cost to them, and the trade offs I had been making were not worth what I might be losing in that moment. And I came back home, Jordan. I sat in the hospital for 2 weeks with my little son, Doug. He was just 4 at the time. And I reevaluated everything about my life. And I did feel kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place because as a provider, I wanted to provide. I needed to provide, right? Be able to bring revenue into the house, give my family a life that they wanted. Now I have all these medical bills, but I wasn't willing anymore sitting in that hospital to trade my presence as a present father, waiting for one day when I had enough money. And I made some new commitments. My son came out of surgery. They closed up all of the holes in his heart. He's now healthier, stronger. He's 20 now. But in that hospital, I made a commitment to be a present father, to figure out the game of money without trading my life and time away doing it. And I'm so grateful for this. You and I were talking a little bit about God before we got on the air. I think God gives us exactly what we need, not oftentimes what we want, but what we need. And that was what I needed to wake me up. That money does have a meaning and purpose, but it is not something that you trade your life away for. You have to figure out how to master money and build and live a life that matters today, not waiting for one day. And so grateful for those early years. I'm grateful for that early experience. And man, I'm so grateful. I'm still married to Bethany. We're coming up on 22 years now. It's been a phenomenal ride. Been married, it's highs and lows, but man, the lows make the highs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations on the longevity. Yeah, it's definitely it's not easy, right? It's not easy to maintain and sustain, and especially when you got two knuckleheads trying to get in the way,
Yeah,
and
man.
pride and ego and all the other fun stuff that us humans get all over us, and I'm so grateful to hear that your son's doing awesome, and 20 years later, it's when moments like that happen, it's they kind of hit us and right in our tracks, like you experienced. But it does build a lot of grit and resilience and tenacity and determination and all the things that make a good trailblazer. And so let's talk about what type of fire this really engulfed into you, right? So now you're like, man, like, do I need to be doing this corporate thing? How much longer did corporate actually last? Was there a side hustle that was birthed out of the research? I'd love you to just give context on what did you do next?
Yeah, man. It was really fascinating that those two events happened for me in consecutive order, right? I lost all that money in 2008. And, the interesting thing about 2008, I know everyone lost money. Everyone had, their own 2008 moment. But for me, I realized I had traded the latter part of 4 or 5 years of my life out of college. I'd worked really hard, and I'm a good saver. I've always been a good saver. And I was really proud of that $100,000 net worth. And I had this arbitrary goal in my mind that I'm going to retire early. That was my whole goal. I was working towards that idea. But in 2008, I realized I have no control and I don't even know what it means. Like, I don't know why I lost money. I don't know how to prevent it. I don't know, like, does someone retire early? And the more I looked into that system, and I'm just going to say that system is kind of the system that we've all been told to follow: go to school, get a job, put your money in a diversified portfolio. The more I realized that I was completely dependent on things that I could not control. I was planning my life, I was trading my life for something I had no control over. And that was really difficult for me. I am a control type of person. I like to feel like I have some influence on my life and I can make choices that impact and shape the direction of my life. And I felt helpless in my financial plan. And so I started reading books, right? I started trying to take a little bit more control. I was doing some option trading and things like that. But no matter what I did, I felt like the second I let money go out of my bank account, it was just kinda cross your fingers and hope that it works out. And at one point, I got to the point where I thought, maybe it's just all a lie. Maybe there's no way to do it. Maybe you've gotta be lucky or an athlete or whatever, make millions of dollars. And then I came across a book, and I think everyone has again these perspective changing moments. And when your perspective changes, what you see changes, your world changes. And it was Rich Dad Poor Dad. It was Robert Kiyosaki. Now I'd heard of that book early on. I thought that's kind of dumb. A book about dads. It's purple. Why would I read that? Right. And I'll never forget when I picked that book up at this point in my life, I read Savers or Losers. I read that the definition of financial freedom isn't net worth, it's cash flow. All of these little things confirmed one thing for me, that the Wall Street system would never allow me to A, have the control, or B, be able to retire early. That's what he means by savers or losers. You're going to lose the game of money. And at that point, I kind of felt like I was losing the game of life because I was spending so much time chasing money. And so, if savers are losers, what do the wealthy actually do? And what I learned is the wealthy aren't doing mutual funds, K's, company sponsored matches better than everyone else. They're literally doing the exact opposites. And so for me, I kind of define these two worlds today as this. There's the dependency economy. I give my money away. I'm dependent on taxes, markets, interest rates, all these different things. And then there's the ownership economy. And we'll talk a little bit about the ownership economy because I didn't fully understand it when I got into it. But Robert Kiyosaki said, buy real estate. So I started buying real estates. And as soon as I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, another book came across my awareness, right? And the book was called Creating Wealth. Now, you're in the real estate world. You might have heard of this guy. His name's Robert Allen. I call him the OG. He's the guy who actually trained Kim Kiyosaki how to invest in real estate. But it wasn't the title of his book that caught my attention. It was the subtitle. The subtitle of Robert Allen's book was Follow Allen's 7 Steps or 7 Principles and you can retire in 10 years. And I thought to myself, holy crap, I can do anything. I'm a knucklehead. I can do anything for 10 years, right? And so I read his book and man, it was the simplest strategy that I could actually see myself doing. He just said, buy 2 single family homes every year for 10 years. And in year 11, you're financially free. And I thought to myself, I could do that, right? I could do that. So being overly ambitious, I directed all of my focus, my attention to being the best employee I could be. Yes, I did start some side hustles. Yes, I partnered. I did everything I could to get my hands on more money so I could get my 20 single family homes as fast as possible. And I'm going to tell you how I learned a lesson and then I'll tell you where I got when I quit. But the first lesson I learned is financial freedom is a function of cash flow. Right. I bought my first house, Jordan, and I walked around the corporate office with my chest puffed out. I'm a real estate investor. I thought I'm so cool. I had no idea what I was doing. I bought my second house. I had a little bit of anxiety. And by the third house, Jordan, man, I had a full blown panic attack. Now, given your background, I'm sure you're going to appreciate this to a certain extent. Maybe you'll sympathize with me a little bit. But you know, I was managing everything. I was finding the properties. I was rehabbing them myself. I was, finding tenants. I was managing the tenants. I am the worst property manager in the world. The worst. I mean, period, the worst. Like if you call me up with a sob story, I just cry with you. And then at the end of the month, you're not paying rents. I'm paying the mortgage, right? And I had a tenant in this third property and he was willing to give me a bigger down payment to get into the property. But man, there were red flags all over his application. I thought to myself, hey, he's going to give me $5,000. How could I resist? But oh my gosh, he made me pay for that over and over and over again. And after managing that property for about 6 months, I developed a healthy anxiety to my phone. Every time my phone rang, dude, my heart race would start racing. I knew there was an issue. Now, back in my corporate days, I used to sell medical equipment. I'm up in Rapid City, South Dakota, selling a boardroom of hospital administrators, all this medical stuff. And my phone, Jordan, boom, is going off. Call after call after call, everyone coming in from a different phone number, same area code. And I knew in the bottom of my heart there was a problem. So I quietly excuse myself from the boardroom. I pick up my phone. I start listening to my voicemails. Voicemail number 1 from the tenant's wife, crying, saying, please don't evict us. Please, she promises she'll never let it happen again. Voicemail 2, 3, 4, 5 from neighbors saying they're going to sue me. Voicemail number 5 from the husband of this wife saying that cat came on his lawn for the last time. He would shoot it again if he had to. And final voicemail from a police officer saying, son, you better call me. And that tenant, who I should have evicted months before, I never should have put him in the property to begin with. I'm a horrible property manager. He shot in the middle of a beautiful neighborhood a neighbor's cat with a gun, a literal gun, because he was sick of that cat coming on what he perceived to be his lawn. And Jordan, at that moment, I felt like I was going to lose it all again. I melted into the corner of I mean, luckily I was in a hospital. They didn't have to wheel me into the emergency room. I felt like that's where I belonged at the time. But I thought to myself, I can't do it, man. I can't do it. I can't go any further. And even though Robert Kiyosaki gave me the perspective that yes, financial freedom is measured in cash flow, I'm so grateful that I took a step back, right? It took me a couple more months, but I learned the lesson that the other side of financial freedom isn't just cash flow, it's time. If you don't own your time, you're not free. I owned a job in real estate, and Jordan, I sucked at that job. And so everything I did after that was how do I build a system where someone else does the work? They find the property, they rehab the property, they manage the property. Jordan, you know this. There are people out there that do it professionally. And man, I want to pay those people so well. I want to high five them. I want to send them Christmas cards to say, I love you so much. I want to own the property. I don't want to manage the property. And so today, well, before I get to today, after that, when I focused on building the system, I went from 3 properties, apprehensive and just about, going into the insane asylum, to scaling to 17 properties and walking away from a 6-figure corporate career just 4 years later. And it was all based on that, again, that one situation, realizing, oh my gosh, I just have a job in real estate. I need to build a system in real estate. That's what set me free.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love the fact that, you went through the adversity and you realized that when you're owning something like that, the buck stops with you,
Yeah.
right? You're the janitor, you're the lawyer, you're the negotiator, you're the salesperson,
Yeah.
you're the housekeeper, you're the maintenance guy, you're everything. And that is being somebody that's been in all of those roles, but like working for a company. It's not easy. Like when like I had my first property I managed, it was me and one other guy, and it was about 70 units, but there's two of us. Like it's a lot, right? You better believe you got to work together. You got to have your ducks in a row, and you realize that, yeah, you can't do it anymore, like literally, because you're going to go crazy, but b, it's way less costly to pay someone else to take it off your plate that probably actually enjoys it too.
You know what?
But
I
that
love
those are hard lessons to learn though.
I love that you said that. Jordan, here's the thing I've learned about the economy. When the economy is functioning perfectly, and obviously it doesn't function perfectly, so this is an ideal scenario, but when you get glimpses of a perfectly functioning economy, each person was born with and given very unique talents. And those talents weren't given to the individual for them just to have, they were given to that individual for them to use in the service of other people. And Jordan, you are authentically leaning into your talents. I'm authentically leaning into my talents. And when we exchange, we both walk away wealthier because you're doing something that gives you fulfillment. I'm going to pay you for it. I mean, like when we exchange, it's an easy exchange because you're doing what God gave you the ability to do, your talents, and I'm doing the same. And I love getting with people that, man, my property managers right now, I love them, man. I send them Christmas cards. I send them thank you, like Chuckarama gift cards all the time because, man, those guys, they do something that they're good at that I would gladly pay them to do. I want them to know I acknowledge them. I'm so grateful for them. And because they're leaning into their talents, it gives me the freedom to lean into mine. And I love that about an economy.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love it. So you go from 3 frustrated and ready to throw in the towel to 17. Man, doesn't this feel great? And it's like a way less of a burden and way less heavy. So what was the where did you scale to after that? And did you think, hey, let's go bigger? Or was it something else? I'd love just to get what actually happened.
Yeah, man. So here's how it all came down. Okay, this another funny story. After 17 properties, I had enough cash flow coming in. Things were moving. I finally had a system down that I'm like, I can just keep adding to this. Really without much additional effort and energy. I had a system down to find properties. Had a system down to evaluate which one was going to make a good investment. I had several teams in place across the country, and so I could with capital. I could just put it into the system and that system would kick out more capital for me. And it just allowed me to build the system faster. But after 17 properties, I'm still working, right? I'm still working. I had my corporate job. I had said no now to a lot of other things. I'm not traveling the country anymore. I'm in a consigned geographic area. I'm a more present father. And I'll never forget the day. This is 4 years after 2008. Okay. I walk into my office and I had a boss, Rob Lamille. Maybe I'll just say Rob. Rob, great guy, but man, you know how it is. You have a boss, and every time the boss is there, there's something going on. And that dude never came to the office ever. I managed my territory really, really well. And he was in the office. And so I knew there was something wrong. And I remember I walk in, and this is the biggest power play, right? He walks me into my office. He sits in my chair behind my desk, and I sit in the other chair. And he proceeds to tell me this is 4 years after 2008. Companies are still kind of tightening their belts. And he's like, you know what? We let go of the manager in this area. We let go of the manager in this area. We let go of the manager in this area. You're lucky to have a job. Now, part of you having this job, you're going to get a little bit of a promotion, and you're going to take over these three areas. And I'll never forget, as he was talking, I had a Charlie Brown moment. Remember back in the day, the Charlie Brown, every time the mom would talk, it sounded like wah, wah, wah. Like I zoned out. He was telling me about this. I'm lucky to have a job. I'm going to take over these territories. And in the back of my head, I was adding up my cash flow, and I was saying, okay, that house pays for my car. That house keeps the light on. That house, that set of houses I can pay my mortgage. And in the back of my mind, I'm just going through this math over and over again. And I wasn't financially free in the sense that I could travel the world, but I had enough cash flow coming in to survive. And I realized for the first time that little teeny doorway of opportunity that honestly was probably always there. I just didn't give myself the permission to see until this moment. And I'll never forget when Rob kind of snapped me out of this, recycling over and over in my brain, this math. He said, Ryan, are you ready to take this promotion? And I looked at him and I said, I quit. And I'll never forget that, Jordan. Like, I didn't mean to quit that day. In fact, as soon as I said that, I wanted to reach out into the air and get those words and pop them back down my throat. I didn't mean to do it. But the second I got over the shock that I just told my boss I quit, like this wave of relief, it just like, oh my gosh, I'm free. And I'll never forget, he tried to talk me. He's like, okay, we're going to double how much I'm going to, he tried to talk me into staying, but I'm like, I quit, I'm done. And so after a few more minutes of negotiating, he realized I was done and I was done. And I walked out to the parking lot of my office because I didn't go into the office that day intending to quit. And I get on my phone and I call Beth, my wife, and I'm like, hey, honey, I just quit my job. Now, this is how you know you're married to an amazing woman, right? She knew the stress and the pressure, and I did not love what I was doing. And she leans into the phone and she says, Ryan, it's about damn time. And I love that, man, because I had no idea what I was quitting to. I didn't I didn't intend to do what I'm doing today. But here's how it all started. After about a week of me quitting, I had a few people. Most people thought I was crazy. I mean, most people were like grateful to have a job. But I had a few people in the corporate world. They called me up and they said, hey, Ryan, I heard you quit. How did you do it? Right. And so I took a few people. And I'm like, hey, I did this. Right. I stopped putting money in a 401k. I did this instead. And they would go start doing it. And then when they would get stuck, they'd come back to me and say, okay, I'm stuck here. What did you do here? And I just started kind of coaching people along the way. And before I knew it, they were quitting or they were getting momentum. They were in control. They felt more empowered with their money. And they would send their friends. And then I would do that with their friends. And before I knew it, I had a group of people that I was helping invest in the way that I invested to walk away from my job. And now, fast forward over a decade later, I've worked with thousands of people. I lead a company called Wealth Outside Wall Street. Today, I have well over 50 doors, in addition to like some bigger units, well, like 50 single family homes, and then some much, much bigger units, golf courses, things like that. But I've just learned how to play the game of money. And going back to that idea of those two economies, I truly understand what it means to be in the ownership economy today. And I'm going to say this for anyone that's listening, anyone that feels stuck with money today. The reason you're probably stuck with money is you're in an economy, the dependency economy, that keeps you dependent. And no matter how well that economy does, that you might have a good market year, you never actually feel in control. And I've worked with so many people that have quote unquote enough money, but because they're nervous about taxes, they're nervous about inflation, they're nervous about market volatility, they're afraid to actually use their money, to spend it. Because in the dependency economy, if I start taking money out of a 401k, I run into a very big question. How long am I going to live, and how much money do I need to have in that account to make sure I don't outlive my money? But in the ownership economy, I own assets that I don't have to sell that generate cash flow. Those assets rise because of inflation. I pay no taxes on my cash flow, and it's a whole different system. And I'll tell you what, Jordan, knowing these two economic games, part of me feels extremely frustrated. I feel like I feel a moral obligation to yell as loud as I can to set as many people free as I can, because so many people trade the majority of their life waiting for one day, and that one day never comes. I was on that path. And it's a very simple approach. The people that feel stuck, they have to take ownership over their money, their choices, and their results. And that's a version of freedom. And it's a scary version of freedom. If I take ownership, I have no one else to blame. You're going to learn some hard lessons, but those hard lessons will teach you real principles that you can't learn any other way. And so, honestly, that's where I'm at today, Jordan. I help people take control of their money, use the exact same model that I learned in those two early books. I show people how to buy 20 single family homes, do it in 10 years or less, put a system behind it to where they own the asset, but it's passive. I help them build a system where just 20 single family homes can generate six figures of tax free income for the rest of your life.
Yeah, no, I love it. And what I love is the fact that where you started was at the idea. The idea turned into three doors. Three doors almost broke you, but you decided to keep going, which led to 17. 17 is now at 50 with some other asset classes in the mix. And then you're also helping other people and replicating the process. And, when I was in property management, as an on-site manager, one of the things that I always tried to do with my team, whether I had a team of me and one other person, or eventually I had a property where I had 24 people on the team between the maintenance team and the office team. I was always looking to duplicate myself. So if
Mm,
I had a leasing professional, I wanted to cross train them and teach them how to be an assistant. If I had an assistant, I wanted them to become a manager, right? Because if we can see the people around us actually getting better, then that means that we're doing our job in my eyes. If we can elevate other people, like I actually would like, hey, go get a promotion, get better than me. Like that actually shows me that I know how to teach people well.
I
And in,
love
in Japan, they say teaching is learning twice. When
it.
one person teaches, two people learn, right? The teacher and the student. And so the fact that you're continuing to teach other people, it's just making you even better and it's elevating your game in the process.
I love that. Teaching is learning twice. It's so true, right? And I really believe, one of my early coaches, because I kind of resisted the idea of helping other people with their finances. That was never in my bingo card. I never thought to myself, oh, I'm gonna help people with money, right? But man, I've found so much joy in this because my real objective isn't to help people maximize their returns, build cash flow. Yes, we do all of that. We measure that. My real objective is to empower people to live a purpose-driven life. And I feel like that's the talent that God gave me. God gave me a talent to help people live their best life by removing the constraint of money. And so when you do something, kind of like what you said, teaching is learning twice. When you learn something and you live it, I think we're also called to lead it, right? So learning then leads to living, living then leads to leading. And as you lead, you learn all kinds of new things. Right now, I work with people that are older than me, that are younger than me. The economy is completely different when I started versus today. And so I've learned so much. And I continue to learn, live, and lead. Learn, live, and lead. And it's a fun cycle to go through in life.
Yeah, I love it. And so I'd love, just out of curiosity, and I think it would be a value add to the audience, think about the last decade, because in the past decade, I feel like we've had a 100 years of change in technology. We talk about machine learning, we talk about AI, we talk about social media. Now we have agentic AI, and there's so much, right? So how has your business changed if you look at 10 years ago versus today when it comes to systems and processes? And being able to actually put a timeline on it, right? Like, hey, listen, in 10 years, we can predict based on this model that you're going to get X results. Like, how has the technology increased your ability to deliver on that promise?
Man, that's a really good question. I'm going to probably give you the antithesis or the other side of that equation. I mean, here's what we do. Okay. Our system is so boring, right? It's so boring. And I want it to be boring. I do not want you to take risk with your money. I want you to take risk with your life, right? Go take risk with your life. And when I say risk, like go adventure, go have fun. You don't want to also take risk with your money. I want you to keep your money. So here's how we do it, man. It's a really simple system. I call it the passive income machine. And I want you to think about three gears all together. And when the gears interlock, they move each other. And so the first gear is you. Gear number one is you have to become the CEO of your money. And here's what I believe. Today, it's harder. Jordan, you and I are the same age, right? Do you remember back in the day when you would carry a wallet in your back pocket? And if you wanted to buy something, you take your wallet out. And if there was no cash in your wallet, you didn't buy the thing. right? We've lost all connection, all touch with our money today. And people now swipe credit cards. And here's the reality that I've noticed people have no idea where their money is going. Now, to a certain extent, they know how much they're paying on rent and that kind of stuff. But money comes in someone's life and it goes out someone's life, and they can't even remember what they bought on Amazon yesterday. And so the first gear is you. You have to be the driver. Money is just a tool. It'll take you wherever you wish, but it will never replace you as the driver. What we do in this first gear is we get people to really get clear on what do I want and why does it matter. I'm grateful that God gave me that experience with my son because it clarified crystal clear for me exactly what I wanted and why it mattered. Without that, I don't know because I had this very arbitrary idea I was going to retire early. I didn't know because I just shifted what I wanted to. I'll retire one day. But once I knew what I wanted, every dollar in my life had meaning and purpose. So that's step number one with gear number one. Every dollar that you have is a function of time that you traded. And if you don't honor where that money is going, you're dishonoring the time that you traded to get that dollar because that dollar is the same tool required to buy your time back. So that's the first gear. I'm going to go to another book. In the book, Richest Man in Babylon, there's this super simple framework to become the richest man in Babylon. It says 10% of all I make is mine to keep. You have to get clear on what you want and why it matters and save a minimum of 10% of everything you make. If you can do that, that's gear one. Gear two Gear two is I want to put my money in a place where I can eliminate everything that's making it harder for me to get wealthy. Taxes, market volatility, interest rates, all of those different things. We use overfunded, high cash value life insurance. Now, Jordan, when I learned this, I'm like, what the heck? No one talks about this, but I want you to consider this. The banks, this is where the banks store all of their capital. All the politicians, including our current president, our last president, they keep millions here. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, you name it. So many people, they use these type of accounts to buy not a death benefit, but to stuff as much cash in these policies as they can. And the reason they do it is two things. Number one, it eliminates taxes. Because it's life insurance, all of this extra cash, you never pay tax on it. It grows automatically with a guaranteed return and a dividend, but it opens up a private line of credit. And so what we do is we make money, we pay taxes once, we shift our 10% or whatever we're capable of saving into an account where we never pay taxes again. We then leverage that line of credit with all the cash we've put in, and we buy a simple single family home. Now, people ask me all the time, when do I scale up to apartments? When do I scale up to mobile homes, whatever, or to syndications? Never, 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 right? Maybe at some point. But the reason we buy single family homes, think about it this way. It is the one asset. If we just use Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everyone needs a place to live. That's what they want at the core foundation of humanity. And most people want to get out of an apartment or they want to downsize from their McMansion and they want to live in a quiet, nice little 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. So I buy those assets. I don't try to time the markets. I just hold them, right? Because if I hold them, they go up in value. Why do they go up in value? Because the government's printing more money. It makes those houses more expensive. And so I use life insurance to be a 20% down payment, bank credit to be an 80% down payment. I hold the asset, I let it go up in value. I strip as much equity, as much cash flow as I can out of that thing. I put it back in this policy and I just repeat the process. And every time those gears turn, the process moves faster. It's more effectively. Now, it used to take me years to pay back policy loans when I would leverage a policy loan to buy a house. Now I can do it in months because I have 50 plus properties generating cash flow, rising in value. And so I just make money. I keep it. It compounds for life. I turn it into cash flow. I put it back in the system where it continues to compound for life. And I just repeat that process. And so has technology helped us? Yeah. But at the same time, we are wealth. Life insurance is the oldest product known to man, right? Single family homes are the oldest product known to man. Can you build better houses today? Yeah, maybe. But man, we buy houses that were built back in the 20s and 30s sometimes and rehab them because they're built better than the houses that are built today. So yeah, I mean, things have changed, interest rates have changed, but the basic framework, people ask me all the time that have followed me, when are we going to do something new? Never. I mean, I'm just going to make money, keep it, turn it into cash flow. And what I'm going to do new is my legacy list, my bucket list. I'm going to go do new adventures, new fun things with my family, new business opportunities. I'm going to take risk over there and I'm going to make sure my wealth is secured forever.
Love it, love it, and I love the framework and the gears. It really puts it into perspective and it simplifies the process.
Yeah.
Especially for people that are like, okay, like put this on a piece of paper for me on a napkin and explain it. And I clearly understood what you're doing, and we're basically just repurposing right? Essentially you're putting it in, it's developing, and we're taking basically leveraging that, we're putting that back into here, and then we're putting it back, and it's just like
It's
a
a
rotating gear. Yeah,
it
it's
is
a
so
cycle.
easy, man. It's just a
Yeah.
simple process to take $1, turn it into multiple dollars, never lose a like, dude, Jordan, and this I'm not bragging about it, all of this, but like that system, I have never lost money now, never lost money in almost 15 years straight, right? Because I'm using system, like I'm not trying to time the market, I'm not doing anything risky, I'm just buying assets, letting those assets generate profits. That tax code now works for me. It's so easy to not pay
Well,
taxes because
time is on your side now, right? Because of
totally,
the amount of assets that you have. So you've got the leverage, you've got the compound, you've got it all. But again, it takes time. It doesn't mean that you're going to get one and then the system's going to be fully functioning tomorrow. No, you've got to build it up, and over
totally.
time it'll continue, and the wheels will get stronger, and so on and so forth. So I love it. I love that concept, and I know a lot of people are going to want to check out your book because in your book you're teaching people how they could do this in a decade. And I'm sure in some instances you've probably had people do it a little bit quicker.
Totally.
But yeah, go ahead and talk about the book and let the good folks know where they can find it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that, Jordan. And I'm going to kind of share a little bit of backstory on the book because it was such a fulfilling moment, right? I mean, for me, my two mentors were Robert Kiyosaki and Robert Allen. And I'll never forget about 4 years ago, I've now been working with clients and we have a whole community that are people that are doing this. And, we hold events quite often because, man, owning real estate, I mean, you got to be a special type of crazy to own real estate. And so we get people together and, we share war stories, horror stories. There's property management stories are the best. I always tell people you're always the most interesting guy in the room because you have all the stories, right? So we hold these events, and every year when we hold events, we give awards, recognition, who's doing what inside of their life and their finances. And a couple of years ago, I thought to myself, you know what? I've never actually met Robert Allen. I've never actually met Robert Kiyosaki. Why don't I invite these guys to one of my events and just put them up on stage and say, I'm going to give you guys the lifetime achievement award because your expertise, your courage to share what you shared has changed my life. And because it changed my life, I have an opportunity to change these guys' lives. And so I brought Robert Allen to the stage, and as a 72-year-old guy, when he came to the stage, he just sat up there and he bawled. He was so grateful and humbled. He didn't, sometimes when you put out content like you do, Jordan, you don't know who's getting it, how it's helping them. And so having him in front of all these people and person after person came up and shaked his hand and said, thank you so much. And so he said, Ryan, I don't know what this is going to look like, but I want to be part of this. And a couple months later, I had an opportunity to sit down with Kiyosaki and say, Kiyosaki, I'm so grateful for your courage. You were the voice. Everyone thought you were crazy. And you are a little bit crazy, but man, I'm crazy with you. And I'm so grateful for it. Right. And so having these two guys, and I showed them what we were doing, they're like, we're all in. Like, I don't know, we're all getting older. And so when I wrote the book, I actually co authored it with Robert Allen. And his book was, follow his 7 principles. And so we just titled the book, Retire in 10 Years or Less. We co authored it together. And then Robert Kiyosaki is all throughout the book. We quote him, he forwards the book. He's in a lot of our we have a whole training platform that comes with the book. So you can actually build your own plan to retire in 10 years or less. And Kiyosaki's all over in that training platform. So
I
that
love it.
honestly was so fulfilling to be able to pay it back to the guys who opened a doorway of possibility for me. And then not only pay it back, to have those guys come in and say, how can we help you take this message, which was originally our message? How can we help you take it forward? And that's been
Yeah,
so fulfilling to work with those guys.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, it was the trailblazers that blazed a trail for you to follow, and then you followed the trail and gave them recognition, and now they're paying it forward to help others on the trail, right? It's just like this evolution of trailblazers helping trailblazers, which is pretty awesome. And we're going to make sure that we link all the information down in the show notes for the book. So, folks, make sure you guys go grab a copy of that. And as we're wrapping up here, where is the best place outside of the book, which we'll get that linked, best place to reach out to you? I know a lot of people are going to get value and they may say, hey, man, I've got a decade to be a knucklehead. Like, let's see what we can do here with this 10 years. And maybe they want to reach out to you for coaching or community, or maybe they hear you, how awesome you were on the show and they want you as a guest on their podcast.
Yeah.
So where can the folks find you?
Yeah, man, I'd love that. So, if you want more info and you just want to binge content, here's what I'll tell you. Go to my YouTube channel. It's wealthoutsideWallStreet.com, where I go into all kinds of, like, all the details behind the economy and everything we talk about. But man, if you want to connect with me individually, everything we do inside of my world is taking like knowledge and converting it into wisdom by helping you with a customized, personalized, individual game plan. We use the principles that never change, and we just apply those principles to your life, to your timeframes, and to your resources. And Jordan, to your point, we've had people retire in 18 months, 6 months, 9 years, everywhere in between, because everyone starts at a little bit of a different spot. Maybe we have to get you out of debt first and then start building assets. Maybe you've got assets, we have to rearrange them. So if you want to reach out to me individually, it's super simple. Everything we do is personalized. And so it's Ryan at wealthoutsideWallStreet.com. Wallstreet.com, that's my email address, personal email address. I do respond to every single email. I love talking to people. It's my greatest, Jordan, I love what you do, right? You connect people, you tell stories, you help improve people's lives, you meet people where they're at. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what an economy is. And that's really what money is meant to do. It's meant to be a medium of exchange to allow people who exchange their talents, their services, their solutions to the problems that the world presents in an economic, in an efficient way. And so for me, everything's personal. Your game plan's personal, our community's personal, and then obviously there's lots of people in the community that we do events and do fun things together with. But Ryan at wealthoutsideWallStreet.com is the best way.
Love it. Perfect. Well, we're going to get all of that in the show notes, folks. Make sure you jump down there, grab the website, grab his email address, grab the copy of the book. Ryan, it's been so amazing having you on the show. As we're wrapping up here, any parting words for the Trailblazers out there?
Yeah, I'll say one last thing, okay? And this is what I care most about when we branded our company, okay? I mean, the book is called Retire in 10 Years or Less, and I love that as a way to measure success. But really what money's greatest intrinsic value is to give you more options in life and more control over your time. And the only way this works, our mantra, it's on the back of every shirt, it's on everything we do, it's rise up, live free. You, I, we all have one shot at this thing called life. One shot. Rise up and claim it. Claim your shot. Claim your opportunity. Claim your life. And living free is a function of you using your God given talents in the service of other people. So rise up, live free. That's what I'll leave you as a parting word.
Love it. Go out there, folks. Rise up, live free, blaze trails. Have an amazing day, Ryan. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come talk to the audience. And it was a pleasure having you on the show. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you, brother.
All right.